She walked into the Grand Foyer of the White House on a Thursday afternoon, stood before cameras without any warning to the press, read a prepared statement for just under 6 minutes, and then walked away without taking a single question. No one saw it coming, and almost no one in Washington fully understood why it happened now. First Lady Melania Trump on April 9th, 2026, delivered one of the most unusual public statements ever made from inside the White House by a sitting First Lady. She denied any ties to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. She denied ever being his victim. She denied that he introduced her to her husband. And then, in a move that immediately complicated the political calculations of nearly everyone around her, she called on Congress to hold a public hearing specifically for Epstein survivors, a demand her husband's own administration has resisted for months. The statement was brief. Its impact was not. In a city consumed by an ongoing war with Iran, where the president's political standing has been under sustained pressure, the First Lady's public appearance came without coordination from the West Wing's communications team. Her spokesperson confirmed that senior White House staff knew she planned to make a statement. What they did not know, according to multiple people familiar with the matter, was what she planned to say. The president himself appeared to muddy that account further. After the remarks were delivered, he told an interviewer that he did not know anything about them beforehand. That answer, given hours after his own office said the West Wing was aware, drew its own round of scrutiny. For those following the Epstein matter closely, the timing was striking. Just one day before Melania Trump stepped in front of those cameras, the Justice Department informed the House Oversight Committee that former Attorney General Pam Bondi would not comply with a congressional subpoena to testify about her handling of Epstein-related documents. That subpoena was scheduled for April 14th. The DOJ's refusal arrived on April 8th. The First Lady's statement arrived the very next day. Whether those events were connected is something no one in the White House has directly addressed. To understand what drove Melania Trump to the podium, it helps to understand what had been building in the months before she got there. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, a law passed after sustained public and political pressure, required the federal government to open its files on the late financier Jeffrey Epstein and his longtime associate Ghislaine Maxwell. Those files, millions of pages released in tranches by the Justice Department, became one of the most politically sensitive document releases in recent memory. At the end of January 2026, a new tranche of documents was published. Among the materials was a heavily redacted FBI interview that contained a claim that Epstein had introduced the Trumps to one another. There were also flight logs showing the president's name appeared 8 times between 1993 and 1996. And there was something else, a photograph found inside a drawer at one of Epstein's properties, showing Donald Trump alongside Jeffrey Epstein, Melania Trump, and Ghislaine Maxwell at Mar-a-Lago in February of the year 2000. The Epstein files also included an email. According to documents released by the Justice Department, an email sent in October of 2002 bearing the name Melania was addressed to someone identified only as G. In it, the sender complimented the recipient on a photograph, referenced a New York Magazine article about Epstein published that same month, and wrote, "I cannot wait to go down. Give me a call when you are back in NY." It was signed, Love Melania. The email addresses for both sender and recipient were redacted in the public version of the document. Ghislaine Maxwell, the G in question according to reporting, responded to that email calling the sender Sweet Pea. Maxwell was convicted on sex trafficking charges in 2021 and is currently serving a 20-year sentence. It was that email, more than anything else, that the First Lady's legal team had been working to get ahead of for months. Her lawyers have been aggressive. They sent legal threats to news organizations that connected Melania Trump to Epstein. Last year, following pressure from her attorneys, one major outlet retracted a story that referenced author Michael Wolff's claim that Epstein had introduced the Trumps. The outlet issued a formal apology. But retractions and legal pressure did not stop the online circulation of the claims. Her senior advisor, Mark Beckman, said in a statement Thursday that the First Lady decided to speak publicly because, in his words, enough is enough and the lies must stop. The statement itself, read aloud from the White House Cross Hall, the same location where the president had recently addressed the nation about the war in Iran, was precise in what it covered and careful in what it acknowledged. Melania Trump said she had never been friends with Epstein. She said that she and her husband had been invited to some of the same social gatherings as Epstein on occasion, as overlapping in social circles is, she noted, common in New York City and Palm Beach. She said the first time she ever personally crossed paths with Epstein was at an event she attended with Donald Trump in the year 2000. She said she had no knowledge of his crimes at that time. She addressed the email directly. She described it as casual correspondence. She said her reply to Maxwell could not, in her view, be categorized as anything more than a trivial note. She then went further than many expected. She stated clearly that her name has never appeared in court documents, depositions, victim statements, or FBI interviews related to Epstein's crimes. She said she had never been on Epstein's plane. She said she had never visited his private island. She said she had never been legally accused or convicted of any crime connected to Epstein. And then came the turn that no one in the West Wing appeared fully prepared for. She called on Congress to act. She said Epstein was not alone. She noted that several prominent male executives had resigned from powerful positions after the case became public. And while she acknowledged that did not amount to proof of guilt, she argued the country owed it to the survivors to be transparent. She then delivered what became politically the most consequential part of her remarks: a direct call for Congress to hold a public hearing for the women victimized by Epstein, with the power of sworn testimony before lawmakers, with their accounts permanently entered into the congressional record. She said in closing, "Then and only then we will have the truth." Then she turned and walked away. No questions, no follow-up, no explanation for the timing. The reaction that followed cut across every political line in Washington, and not always in the directions anyone anticipated. Democrats, who had been calling for exactly such a hearing for months and had been told repeatedly that it was not going to happen under the Republican-controlled Congress, found themselves in the unusual position of agreeing with the First Lady. Representative Robert Garcia, the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, described the remarks as pretty stunning and called on the Republican committee chair, Representative James Comer of Kentucky, to schedule a hearing immediately. He posted publicly that the First Lady had done two things: pushed back on the administration's effort to wind down the investigation and joined Democratic calls for public testimony from survivors. Representative Ro Khanna of California, who co-authored the Epstein Files Transparency Act alongside Republican Representative Thomas Massie, said he agreed with the call for a hearing. He directed a public challenge at Speaker Mike Johnson, noting that a bipartisan group of lawmakers had been pressing for this for months, while the Republican majority remained silent. Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina, a vocal advocate for Epstein accountability within the Republican caucus, praised the First Lady on social media, saying Melania Trump stands with Epstein victims. But not everyone saw it as advocacy. Representative Thomas Massie, the Republican co-author of the transparency law, pushed back. He argued that bringing survivors before Congress was ultimately the Justice Department's responsibility, and that the department had already failed those survivors once, most notably when Pam Bondi, during a February congressional hearing, declined to even acknowledge them. Massie called for prosecutions. The survivors themselves offered a more measured response. Two of Epstein's accusers, Maria and Annie Farmer, issued a statement that said simply, what they want is accountability, transparency, and justice. A broader group of survivors and family members of the late Virginia Giuffre put it more directly. They said the First Lady's statement shifted the burden back onto the victims, while the administration itself had still not fully complied with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Some White House officials, according to people familiar with internal discussions, were genuinely caught off guard by the timing of the remarks. There had been debate inside the First Lady's circle, one official said, about whether to proceed at all, given that the story had faded somewhat from public attention in recent weeks. The concern was that addressing it publicly now would bring it back. That concern, it turned out, was well-founded. Former Attorney General Pam Bondi, who was removed from her position in part due to her handling of the Epstein files, had already become a central figure in the congressional investigation. Her refusal to testify under a lawfully issued subpoena delivered the day before the First Lady's statement had set the stage for a confrontation between the Justice Department and the House Oversight Committee. Melania Trump's statement arrived directly into that space. The broader political question that emerged Thursday was not simply what the First Lady said, but what happens next because she said it. Several Democratic lawmakers following her remarks began openly arguing that if the First Lady believed so strongly in the power of sworn testimony before Congress, she should be willing to submit to that same process herself. Representative Suhas Subramaniam of Virginia, a member of the House Oversight Committee, said directly if she wants to clear her name, she should come testify under oath before the committee herself, because it was clear that was what she was attempting to do. That argument carried additional weight because of a precedent set earlier this year. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had already provided a deposition to the House Oversight Committee as part of its ongoing Epstein investigation. Her appearance established for the first time that a spouse or close associate of a sitting or former president could be compelled to engage with congressional investigators in this context. The White House has not indicated whether the First Lady would be willing to appear before any committee. Her office has not responded to follow-up requests for comment on that question. The Epstein Files Transparency Act itself remains only partially fulfilled. Lawmakers from both parties have complained that the Justice Department's most recent document release was incomplete. Officials said additional time was needed to review newly discovered materials and to protect sensitive information about victims. That explanation has not satisfied members of either party on the committees overseeing the matter. Meanwhile, the former president's own name appearing in the files has generated ongoing attention. President Trump has denied any wrongdoing related to Epstein and has said he severed ties with him in the early 2000s, before any criminal conduct came to light. There is no evidence of wrongdoing by the president. His statements on the matter have been consistent. But the files themselves, partially released and partially withheld, have ensured the conversation has not closed. As of Thursday evening, the House Oversight Committee's Republican majority had not publicly committed to scheduling the hearing the First Lady requested. The Justice Department had not reversed its position on former Attorney General Bondi's subpoena. And Ghislaine Maxwell, serving her sentence at a minimum security facility in Texas, remained the last living figure with direct knowledge of the full scope of Epstein's operation, still seeking a presidential pardon that, as of now, no one in the White House has confirmed is being seriously considered. The First Lady asked for truth to follow testimony. What follows the First Lady's own statement remains, for now, an open question.